Welcome to Morgan Latif Presents. I'm so excited to talk about our next guest, Florian Pfefferle, who is an ex-leader in Danaher. He's also the ex-group president of IDEX, and actually he's currently a partner for a new venture at the moment. He has a wealth of knowledge and leadership in managing small but also huge teams from a wide range of cultures. And so he's also taken companies through great growth periods and helped them navigate through chaotic times. So I learned so much from this one, and I really hope that you enjoy it. Florian, we finally made it. We're on when we're live, and I really appreciate you coming on to the Leadership Podcast.
Sure.
I feel like we've got a lot to learn from your experience as well. But how are you getting on anyway? I've not spoke to you for a couple of weeks, so what have you been up to?
Life's great, challenging as usual, but life's good. Different projects and private challenges, but no bad challenges at all. So all good stuff.
Good, excellent, yeah, excellent. We were actually just talking just before we started the recording on a little bit about the generational differences and how much the time has changed even over the last 25 years. It is quite crazy, even culturally, you mentioned, and also the technology. It's the gap, I think, even from the 70s to 2000s, from 2000s now to where we are, I think is astronomical, in comparison to technology as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's also the cultural aspect, in terms of international companies, right? I mean, while in 80s and 90s, kind of were stuck in your bubble, let's say. You had your own market and your local market, and now everything is very global. And might go back a little bit, but I think it's already too far to go back too much, to roll back too much. But that's another element of different business cultures. You have to kind of digest and get accustomed to, and there's just many aspects outside of the technology. What is pretty clear right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that we are having this interview via video, and
that's crazy.
Sitting in Germany, you're sitting in London. I mean, that's just one aspect of it.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking there, because I think actually when I think about what I say, the old times, like in the sense of, like, I don't know, even my own father, for example, he was someone that grew up a lot of structure and a lot of he had not saying I'm going to say that a lot of moral base, but in the sense of those were hard times that he grew up in, and it kind of taught a lot of good values, but at the same time he kind of was put in a box. So really the creative thinking and the ability to really challenge the status quo wasn't there. And I think almost now in my generation, or even just the future, there's so much creativity and so much ability to be entrepreneurial, but sometimes it's hard to kind of find the structure to really allow that creativity to flow in the right way, if that makes sense. I don't know if you've seen that over the years, or even over the people you've managed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that old, but I'm just kidding. No, I think, I mean, I often think about, this specific challenge in terms of leadership, right? And, as a leader, I think you also have to give people some sort of structure, some sort of playbook where they can feel comfortable with, right? But on the other hand, obviously also open it up. But I think you need to find the right balance between the two. I mean, obviously it depends on the people you're working with, the functions they have, and so on. Like you give it less or more freedom. You give your team less or more freedom. But in general, it's absolutely clear that those old days where you had your job and you do what you've been told to do, those are over. And I think for the good, like I explained before, I like this style of working, because it engages people more.
Mm.
People feel more comfortable at work. They can interact with all the leaders, with everybody in the team, and I think this creates better companies and creates value.
Yeah,
So
100%.
the companies that solve that, I think, are in a much better position than the ones that don't, right? And that's why I guess, especially in Germany, there's a lot of automotive companies, very old school. That's why they are struggling.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I mean, talking about that, obviously, when we talk about the cultural piece, we talk about the way that the world is now, actually, the world has had a lot going on over the last sort of 6, 7 years. We had COVID, we've had wars. Even before COVID, Britain had Brexit, or Europe had Brexit, I suppose. So, like, even that, these are seismic events that are happening in the world over the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years. And I suppose one of the questions I think a lot of our audience would love to kind of get a feeling from maybe some of the stories that you have in your experiences, like in a time of chaos and uncertainty in the market, as a leader, from your experience, what is the best way to lead a company through those times? Because there is a lot of uncertainty, in a business. I even noticed it in my own family, even as a father, your own family P&L changes because of inflation or whatever. But if you're running a
Yeah.
company, you've got thousands of people that you're dealing with, but also you've got leaders that you've got to keep on a level head to kind of help drive in the right direction. And then from your experience, how do you manage that?
Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, those changes have always been going on. Yes, they are way more public now, in the media everywhere. Yeah, and I mean, the question is always, how does it affect your company? And I think the best way to deal with it is actually to prepare for those events. Even, if they don't happen, perfect, right? But if they happen, you take the emotions out. And what I've always done, and what I always told my GMs, get on a sheet of paper, what would you do if your revenue drops by 5, 10, 20%? And also, what would you do if your revenue all of a sudden increases by the same amount? Who would you hire? Where would you put your investments? But also, where would you cut costs? Because, obviously that's the first place you go to when your revenue drops. Yeah, I mean, you can't make that up usually. So you have to look at your cost position and see what you can do there. And when actually you don't have a crisis, the discussion is way easier. Because then people are not in the panic mode. People are more open to discuss things because they're actually not happening at that point, and like I said, hopefully they never happen. But you get a list, you kind of get an action plan together. And if really the event comes, you can go back and say, okay, this was my playbook, right? And now I can pull this out, and usually it still makes sense. If you do it on an annual basis, it's probably still valid. So that's the executional piece, right?
Yeah, sure.
And the strategic piece, the worst thing you can do, get into panic mode, and try to visit new customers, trying to find new revenue and so on. And that's usually, not a good idea. And, I've been a very strong fan of 80/20, which, in very short terms means you're focusing on your top revenue customers. I've done a lot of analysis on different companies within my old companies, but also, in the last few years. And, half of your business usually, if you cut your customer base in half, the bottom half, I've never seen any company that has the bottom half of larger than 3% of their total revenue in the bottom half. Wow. Which means, you're spending a lot of time on this irrelevant customers. Some might be up and rising, but 99% are usually you never make a good business from them. And in crisis, going after these guys is usually a bad idea. Go after the big guys and try to stabilize the business, or try to win new business. Focus, right, and allocate resources. I think that I've seen this in situations where we had crisis or we didn't have crisis. It always worked. It's where you put your focus on. And we talked earlier on about the structure versus no structure, and this can give the company quite a nice structure and the people in the company, because they then know what to do. They have the official script or playbook to do that, and that gives security, because hey, it's not easy to tell a customer go to our distributor, or we have to increase price or whatever, to make this better. And like, this gives people a little bit of security.
So to go deeper into that a little bit, so for example, obviously when a company is on a global scale maybe losing money, right, because of just the way the market is, or whatever it is, naturally the problem then becomes not just a market problem, but you also culturally have lots of different countries and cultures that deal with that problem in a very different way. Maybe Europeans might hit the panic button and try to fix it straight away. Maybe people in America will just go double down and try to really smash it out of the park, and maybe they'll find a way to get there. And then generally more reserved cultures in Asia, they're kind of like head in the sand sometimes, and sometimes it is a little bit like, how do you take all those cultures in a time of chaos and say, right, like, we've got a plan? Or you mentioned that you have this sort of prevention mode where they already have a playbook if that happens. So do you say you do that for every single culture, and does that differ depending on the country you're dealing with or the culture you're dealing with?
Yeah, obviously. So I think, first of all, to be honest, I've seen that usually the people working for a specific company, for these instances where it comes down to we have a cash flow crisis or whatever, or a profitability crisis, they usually react to the culture of the company. And of course, there's different cultures in Asia and Europe, North America, on how action oriented they will be. But usually I would say the company culture tops the national culture.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
But obviously there's there's different ways to get to Rome. So there's different ways to get to Rome. So it's as long as you reach your target, it's absolutely fine, right? And that comes down to each individual country and location, on how they can get there. Being over prescriptive is not a good idea, simply, the knowledge is there. People have the experience that work there, and the way to get there is on them. But what usually works well is to write it down and to define metrics and to see how they track on versus progress. So give them the freedom of how they want to do it, but the results need to come.
Yeah, because I think I've seen that a lot, and even from CEOs of big corporations, where, because they know that it's all kind of landing on them at the end of the day if they're reporting to shareholders, and sometimes they end up going into micromanagement mode. And like you say, you mentioned, actually it's important to give them the freedom and the trust to solve the problem. And actually, in some ways, it can be the worst thing to do is to go into micromanagement mode and say, hey, because you can't manage 4,000 people as a micromanagement. So you'll run yourself into the ground.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and you can't start that culture in a crisis, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, actually, you probably can, but you know, like it doesn't immediately click, right? I mean, it's this, you know, in crisis, you're definitely more micromanaging than in a non-crisis situation, obviously.
Sure.
But also to a point, if you're going too deep and too detailed, it's probably not the right way to do it as well. So and like you said, people usually know their business very well, and they know the triggers. So it's all about enabling them to pull these triggers. And then to me, that's what leadership is all about: to be an enabler and to get barriers out of their way, and not, you know, to tell them how they should exactly do it, but rather to help them, you know, being servant.
Yeah, that's a big thing that I've noticed, even coming from like the Danaher culture, when I interview people from Danaher culture or general cultures of that similar sort of environment, that servant leadership piece, because I think the natural instinct when things go wrong is to want to micromanage, because I know how to do it, but then that stunts growth, that stunts the opportunity to allow the person to solve the problem and get their own war stories out of that for the future problems and so on.
Yes.
Do you feel then you're almost creating a crisis by trying to micromanage in some ways, because you kind of have to fight against that instinct and allow them to try and solve the problem themselves and trust and fight against that?
Yeah, I mean, there's, like you said, there's always the tendency to go in and do it by yourself because you just know how it works and how to do it, right? But I mean, and it actually takes more energy to think about how to be servant, how to remove barriers, and how to enable them. It takes a lot more energy, and it might even take more time. But you know, as we talked earlier on, you know, it depends on how you define it, but there will always be a crisis going on, right? The product fails with a big customer, introduction didn't go well, you know, one customer left you, or you know, or COVID, whatever, right? There's I mean, there's and if you don't have a team that is prepared for these challenges, and a team you can trust and rely on, and they can trust and rely on you, that's not going to end well, right? I mean, you just can't scale at the end of the day. I mean, because there will always be something going on, and you know, long term, you want to grow the company and you want to be more profitable and all of these, and you can only do that by having the right people on board and you know, trying to help them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And another thing I wanted to get your thoughts on is because emotional intelligence comes up a lot now in leadership, and I think it is a big topic. And so I was curious to kind of understand from your perspective on how important it is to get this right, because I don't know if there's a lot of assumptions on the word emotional intelligence. Does that mean, you know, you have to give people the freedom, but also, like, even if they're failing, you know, not to hit them on the head of the stick? Of course, that's really important. But then I think, you know, some people might push back and say, well, if you're too much like that, then where is the accountability, and where's the where do we draw the line to make sure that people have the work ethic to perform, you know? And so I was kind of curious to kind of get your thoughts on the kind of, you know, how important that is in leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it like a football game. You know, the football game starts at, like, there's a framework around it, right? The football game starts at a certain point. You know, there's certain rules to it, but then the coach coaches the team on how to play, what the strategy is, but then, you know, each player still has to take the ball and pass it and so on. So you know, I kind of like to think it in that direction. You know, set clear expectations, and goals and expectations. You know, discuss those with the team. You know, be very transparent also, you know, in terms of what the challenges are, and you know, and how we, you know, like how the company can be very successful going forward. And like have the team rally around these challenges and see how they deal with it and try to help them, obviously. If they're failing, and yeah, it's always easy to say, yeah, they, even if they make mistakes, they will, they will come out better. I mean, that's one thing. Yes and no. If that person doesn't get it, what the mistake was and what they would do differently, okay, maybe it's the wrong person. So it's it's. I think you need both. You need to be flexible and you need to be open, but also you need to be clear. Clear in terms of the employee's performance, clear in terms of what went well, what didn't go well. So like on the spot coaching, hey, this was good. Maybe you should think about this. How do you think about that in a different direction? And just be clear, be transparent with how you think, and also be transparent. Be vulnerable. When you make a mistake, don't. I mean, just try to admit it. I think that's one thing. Like being in a let's say startup currently. Working for that startup or for I'm also an investor in. Yeah, it's such a different leadership style you have to apply, and I quite like it. I'm even discussing some personal changes with some people of the team, with their colleagues.
Yeah.
I would have never done that in the past.
Okay.
But it's building that trust and kind of involving and engaging people into the decision making and be very open why you think that and also get the feedback. And I might not be always be right and they will tell me, hey, look about check this aspect or just rethink this aspect. And yeah, that's a huge change. In terms of emotional intelligence, you just have to listen and be more adaptive, I guess, versus okay, here's the direction.
Yeah, I remember I can't remember how old I was. I was 22, I think, when I ended up getting the privilege to manage quite a large team. It was about 30, 40 people. I think it was maybe closer to 40, but there was a wide range. And it was my first time managing people. And I would have said at the time, I'm an emotional guy. I understand emotions and so on. But I think maybe because of an experience and so on, I was trying to manage. But what I was doing was saying, this is what you need to achieve, and this is what you need to achieve, and come back to me if you can't achieve it, and we'll do that. And then I got pulled in by a mentor at the time, and he said, Joe, like the team was underperforming, and I was getting proper stressed out. And he was saying, nobody's interested in your goal. Yes, you're telling them you need to achieve this, and it's all about you, and this is what you need to do, and you're being very clear in your instruction, but nobody's interested in what Joe wants. They're interested in them. So he told me to go back to them all and say, okay, sit down individually with every single one of them and say, what do you want to achieve, right? And then let me help you do that. And there I saw the opportunity to say, oh, now this is the servant leadership piece. This is the emotional part where you can actually support them, because then they come to me with an amazing goal, and it's their baby now to say, hey, I want to achieve all these things. And naturally, as a byproduct, I realized the whole team's goals were achieving my goal. But it wasn't because I'm telling them this is what we need to achieve. It's actually because I'm here to help you achieve your goal. And naturally, that's achieving the goal that I had. And for me, that was a real penny drop moment where I was like, oh, wow, I'm now seeing how I can emotionally develop these people and support them as a coach kind of element to help them achieve their goals. And it kind of resonates a lot with what you were saying there. It's kind of sitting back, listening. It's not about me. It's not about the company. But if you can get them to be passionate about achieving their own goal, naturally as a byproduct, it's going to achieve the overriding goal as well.
Yes, I mean even revenue and profit is a byproduct. You know, if you take that example, it's a byproduct of what each individual contributes to the big picture.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean that was a good mentor.
Yeah, he's great. He's great, for sure.
Or is a
very,
good mentor.
yeah, very direct speaking as well, which is good. I think you say like you've been vulnerable because he'd been there himself, so I think he recognised that moment in his career as well. And it's interesting. I was actually, when I was leading that team, and it's kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this, because I noticed that there were certainly people that had a natural ability to lead, but also there were people that I thought could lead, but then really could not. And from your experience, because you've obviously experienced lots of different cultures, you've done it on a global scale, and kind of, can you give me an example where, how did you nurture people into leadership? How did you identify those people? And kind of, you know, any examples from your experience of kind of where maybe even it was people that you didn't expect to step up into leadership? Like, how do you do that? Do you think it's a nature versus nurture thing, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think and at the end of the day, it's both. You know, you know, early on in my career, you know, I was a production manager in this automotive firm, and you know, you see people on the assembly line, and you know, when you start talking to them, you know, wow, there was a lot of leadership there. You know, maybe not within the company, but you know, they were head of the sports club, of the local sports club, or some musician club, whatever, right? I mean, yeah, you know, you have to be careful on saying is a natural leader or not, you know, because you never know. And you know, a natural leader, it depends on what situation, right? It might be a perfect leader for everything outside of a company. You know, because they, you know, they're just different rules and whatnot, right? So, you know, I think it's a very thin line, you know. I guess when hiring people, when hiring leaders, to me, it's always like, how did you manage your team, you know, and you know, how did the team react? What would they say about you? These kind of questions. And you know, it kind of comes back to, you know, to me, a good leader has a few attributes, you know. First, awareness, you know. Second, what I learned, most good leaders, they're highly critical about themselves. They always think, you know, like one of my bosses and a great mentor, he once said, there's not a day, Florian, there's not a day when I wake up and I think, oh my God, they at one point they will see what a loser I am. It's interesting, right?
Yeah, that's super interesting.
So very, very self-critical. Yeah, and then there's, you know, to me, it's always been this telescoping thing. And maybe that's the old school version, but you know, I want to go down into to the shop floor, to the customer, whatever, and you know, I want to be able to see what's going on there, and then I want to go up and say, okay, what does that mean for the company, or you know, is it relevant or not, and how I can steer it. And this, you know, constantly going up and down, never staying up, never staying down. A lot of people failed not being able to do that, you know, too high level or too much into detail. And you know, when you talk to people, that's something, you know, that immediately sticks out. Those three attributes. And in the end, there's also, you know, people need to have the urge to scale kind of their ideas or what their vision is, right? You know, when you talk to people, you know, this would be such a great product, you know, if if we could do this and that, and like if I can allocate this resource into the here and there, then you can see, hey, there's more to it. There's a fundamental urge to do more. Like all the money and so on. If title driven, I think that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
They need to prove. People need to prove that they are willing to lead teams, because I mean the whole aspect has changed so much. I guess it's more difficult than it used to be, because you
Yeah.
just can't direct people anymore. Like you said, you have to give them the framework and give them the freedom to be successful. I think the key is to, like, what can I do to make my team successful?
And then they'll
If you
breed
have
from
that
there.
attitude, that's then you're pretty much there.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, because the question I had in my mind as well was, can someone be a leader without actually leading people? But I think you kind of almost answered that question, because from what I got from what you were saying there is actually you could be a leader, but in like an idea, or you could be a leader in, sales guys, for example. Sometimes you just need a white rabbit, someone that's going to break the 4-minute mile, someone who's going to show that it's possible to then, they may not be leading people, but they're showing that you can break this certain amount of money each month, or break into a certain customer. And then all of a sudden they're leading the way, they're the pioneer for that. So it's not a leading of people, but at least they're breaking down barriers as a leader in some ways in the
Yeah,
front line.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, we tend to think in org charts.
Yeah.
And,
That's exactly it.
like,
Yeah.
now I got the title, now I'm in this box, and really the great people great leaders are doing it because they think or they feel it's the best direction, and people are following them.
Mm.
I've even seen when, when you then promote that person and say, oh, you have the title of director, whatever, they freak out. They just can't, they're like, oh, why? But like I wasn't doing anything, and what shall I do in this position? And it's not comfortable for them. I mean, in the end, it's not about the title. It's about the results, and some people just couldn't cope with that.
Yeah.
With that idea of, oh, now and some people don't even like it, like, oh, now I have to do an annual discussion about performance, salaries, and so I don't want to do that, right? I want to lead from behind. And I think that's the opportunity that there's way more freedom. This would not have happened 20 years ago. I think there's way more way more flexibility within companies if they have the right culture to initiate something like that, where you don't have too many formalized leaders, a very flat structure.
I've even noticed it massively now that we've moved kind of into this remote world. You kind of, as a leader or even as a manager, you could call it that, you have to get so skilled at accountability, because there is a lot less hands-on mentorship you can do now, because you might have like a remote sales team, someone based in the south of Germany, in the north, or someone in France and in Spain, and you can't have them all in one place. So you have to be very good at this accountability piece, servant leadership, you could call it, holding them accountable to their goals, rather than like, oh, I think it's something I remember even as a salesperson, if my manager was in the office, I'd be up in my game just because you just naturally did it because you wanted to show that you were doing the right thing. But it's not like that now, because you could be in your office at home hiding behind the computer, but if you're accountable to your goals, then that's what you're driving towards. It's not because your manager's going to be in the office that day, it's because you've got a goal to achieve, and that's what it is. And that can come in different forms as well. But I think the leadership is evolving over time as well because of this new element as well.
It's not getting easier, for sure.
It's a dying breed, also a new breed at the same time.
Yeah. I think, like a hybrid world is probably the ideal world. I mean, like I come from industrial technology. So there is a lot of interaction that needs to happen, and like from time to time, you just have to meet because humans are still humans, and you need to smell the other person. You need to kind of see the reaction. You need to interact with them. If you're only doing that via video call, that's probably tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's still a human element in all of this, and we also have to appreciate it. Not. I know it's very vogue to everybody works in home office, but it's kind of sometimes it's a bit over the top, or you just need a really, really good manager that can deal with that. But then you have to almost set daily or weekly targets, and then there's a fine line to micromanagement, and it's not easy. I think it's the middle that makes sense.
I think that's why there's so much content out there on leadership, because it's such a fine art and it's evolving all the time, and it's very situation dependent sometimes as well. Like you say, like depending on your company model, the business you're in, the style needs to change or whatever. I think that's why there is so much out there.
Yeah, one size fits all. That's just that, like I said, there's so many elements, countries, cultures, individuals. I mean, yeah, I think this, I think this is true for every company. Like a one size fits all. And I remember everybody wanted to copy the Danaher business model, and a lot of people failed, because it needs to fit the company culture, or you have to bring the company culture towards that model, which takes years. You need to adopt it, and it usually works well, but you need to be prepared and not just copy and paste. Just send everybody into home office because everybody else is doing it, right?
Yeah.
You have to find your own way, and to me, this is also what great leadership is. To kind of have that sense for the culture, for the team, for the product, for the customer, obviously.
Yeah, no, listen, I really appreciate your insights and thank you so much. And I really hope that everyone takes a lot from your war stories and so on. And yeah, I appreciate it. So thanks for your time, Florian.
Awesome, Joe. Thanks.